The stars in Sector Thalos 9 hadn't flickered for 1,000,000 years. No traffic, no records, no memory. Just an unspoken, eerie silence. A silence that tasted wrong in the mouth of Commander Irek Valshar of the Zenthari Dominion. His ship, the Tracer Fang, glided through the ancient dust of the void like a silver knife through bone. He wasn't looking for anything. This was supposed to be routine. Another cold recon across unclaimed space to map dead coordinates. Then the thing appeared. It didn't show up on sensors. It wasn't transmitting. No heat signature, no energy pulse, nothing. Just a shape, massive, jagged, and absolutely wrong, drifting like a corpse in the dark. It looked like it had been there forever. The crew didn't know what to call it at first. Half the junior analysts thought it was a derelict asteroid base. Others said it might be an abandoned war station from the forgotten Red Worlds. But when they brought the scan data into full resolution and fed it through the Dominion archives, one word came up, highlighted in red. Human. That word didn't mean much to most Zenthari these days. Humans were ancient myths, primitive creatures that had burned hot and fast across the stars before collapsing under the weight of their own wars. Long extinct, forgotten. Dead. Valshar, though, he remembered. His father told him stories. If you ever see one of their ships, boy, you turn back. You do not speak. You do not listen. You do not wake it. But Valshar was no coward. He had fought in 3 Dominion conquests, held rank above 27 legions, and stood before the Takai tribunal during the burning of Urathon. He had earned his fearlessness. So he ignored the warnings. "Bring us closer," he ordered. The crew hesitated, but they obeyed. The ship approached the relic, its shadow blotting out stars. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the Tracer Fang. Its armor hull scarred with battle wounds so ancient they looked fossilized. Its surface was blackened, scorched, like it had passed through suns. Along its side, buried beneath layers of rust and cosmic dust, one line of primitive text barely remained. Cessnova Gloria, humanity's final crusade. No one spoke. Valshar narrowed his eyes. The lettering, it was human all right, but the style, the paint, the etching, it looked wrong. It wasn't just old, it was ancient beyond belief. Tens of thousands of years at least. And yet the ship hadn't decayed. It was preserved perfectly, like something that refused to rot. "Prepare a boarding team," he said. The officers looked at him like he'd gone mad. Captain Shurik of Security hissed through his mandibles. "Commander, that thing's dead. It's not even broadcasting. If it was human tech, it shouldn't have survived this long. What if it's rigged, or worse, alive?" Valshar turned to him slowly. "You afraid of ghosts, Captain?" Silence. They launched the pod. 4 elite Zenthari soldiers, including Valshar himself, made contact with the ship's outer hull. They moved slow, magnetic boots clamping against the black steel until they reached an airlock. It opened without force, like it had been waiting. Inside, it was darker than space. The lights were dead, but the corridor walls were coated with strange markings, scratches, symbols, and phrases in the human language. None of it made sense. Until they reached the inner chamber. Then the lights came on, not all at once, just a slow, bleeding glow that poured from the floor like blood rising in a pool, red, pulsing, alive. And then the voices began. Not words, screams. Millions of screams, overlapping, merging, growing louder inside their helmets. Not external, not audio, internal. Valshar felt his lungs tighten, his vision blurred. The others screamed and clutched their heads, but he gritted his teeth and pushed forward. In the center of the chamber they found it. A vault. Sealed. Locked in layers of steel and memory, and etched above it, in ancient English, barely readable beneath decay, "In here lies our wrath." That's when the ship spoke, not in Zenthari, not in code, but in ancient, brutal English. A single sentence carved into the minds of every soldier present. "You were never meant to find this." Valshar staggered back, heart pounding. The vault hissed. Something inside stirred. Something old, angry, and very much alive. Valshar had seen death before. He'd seen men boiled alive in acid storms on Drelkus V, watched cities vaporized in a single Dominion purge. He'd even looked into the eyes of a god machine during the orbital genocide of the Troganic moons. But this wasn't death. This was something older, something that had taught death how to crawl. The words still echoed inside his skull like poison. "You were never meant to find this." It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a threat. It was a judgment. The vault began to breathe. Not open. Breathe. The outer shell expanded and contracted like lungs coated in steel. The sound wasn't mechanical. It was biological, wet and alive. Each breath sent tremors through the floor. The lights pulsed faster, red to crimson, like a heartbeat spiking into fury. Valshar's second-in-command, Koresh, backed away, his spines erect in panic. "This isn't tech. This is wrong. This ship remembers." Valshar didn't respond. His jaw clenched. He could feel something clawing behind his thoughts, memories that weren't his, screams, fire, ash, a planet split in half by kinetic bombs the size of continents. He blinked hard, forcing the visions away. "We need to shut it down," Koresh said, his voice cracking. "Seal the vault, burn the corridor, destroy the data and—" The vault spoke again. Not a voice this time. Images. Inside every soldier's mind, like a spear of ice driven between their eyes. A battlefield on a planet with 3 suns. Human soldiers in black power armor. Covered in dried blood, laughing as they walked across mountains of alien corpses. Not just soldiers. Monsters. One dragged a Zenthari war mother by her mandibles, her thorax crushed, her eggs trailing behind her like shattered pearls. Then the screen of memory shifted. Another war, another genocide. This time, a city full of crystalline life forms begging for mercy, until a human warlord launched a sun spear, melting the planet's surface into obsidian glass. Then a human face, eyes blank, skin burned, metal fused into the jaw. He whispered a word. Retribution. Koresh dropped to his knees, retching into his helmet. The others followed one by one, breaking under the flood of horror. Only Valshar stayed upright, fists clenched, blood leaking from his nose. This wasn't just a vault. It was a prison, and something inside was leaking. Valshar hit his comms. "Return to the ship, now!" "No!" Koresh shouted, staggering to his feet. "We destroy this now. We burn it before it infects anything else." Valshar turned to him slowly. "You think fire will kill what made fire a weapon?" Koresh bared his teeth, losing composure. "This was a mistake. You ignored protocol, ignored every regulation. We were never meant to be here." Valshar didn't answer. His eyes were on the vault. It had stopped breathing. Worse, it had started listening. There was a presence behind the door now. You could feel it. Not just in the air, but in your bones. Like standing on the edge of a mountain moments before an avalanche starts. And then the vault opened, not with a bang, not with violence. It unfolded, like a flower made of steel and spite. Inside wasn't a weapon, not in the way Valshar expected. It was a room, circular, covered in walls of shifting code and floating orbs of ancient data. At the center, surrounded by cables and melted iron, was a chair. And in that chair, a corpse. Human. Barely. The flesh was almost mummified, bone exposed in places where the synthetic armor had fused with the body. The face was obscured by a cracked helmet, but one eye socket glowed dimly with red fire. The chest cavity had been torn open and rebuilt with machinery that still hummed, barely alive. One word blinked slowly on a nearby panel in dead human script. "Inhibitor offline." Koresh read it out loud. His voice cracked. "What the hell does that mean?" Valshar already knew. "They kept it alive," he whispered. "They made it sleep. But the machine's breaking down. That thing, he's waking up." Koresh took a step back. "We're leaving." But Valshar didn't move. He stared at the corpse. The faint red glow from the eye socket seemed to track him, not consciously. Not yet. But there was intelligence there. Buried, caged, insane. He took another step forward. Koresh grabbed his arm. "Valshar, for the love of the Dominion, we have to go. If this thing fully wakes..." Valshar pulled free. "If it wakes, the galaxy needs to remember who made it angry." A low hum began to rise from the floor. The red lights deepened to near black. Words appeared across the wall panels in perfect, flawless English. "Beginning memory dump. Preparing host interface. Biolock confirmed. Target, Valshar." Koresh shouted something behind him, but it was drowned out by the sudden shockwave that hit the chamber like thunder. Valshar was lifted off his feet and thrown against the wall. The others screamed. Systems died. Lights exploded. Comms went dead. When Valshar opened his eyes, he was alone. No Koresh, no team, just the corpse. And a voice. "You opened the door." It wasn't audible. It was inside his thoughts. Slow, mechanical, but soaked in something worse than hate. Resentment, pain, and a terrible kind of hope. Valshar staggered to his feet. "What are you?" The corpse moved. Just slightly, enough to crack bone. "I am memory." The data orbs around the room lit up, and Valshar was drowned again. He saw Earth, not as it was now, but how it looked before the fall. Beautiful, scarred, desperate. Then the great departure. Ships leaving Earth in millions, every ship a weapon, every soldier indoctrinated not just with loyalty, but rage. He saw the final crusade, the campaign that no species had survived, not even their gods. Humanity hadn't died, they hadn't lost, they had finished their mission and vanished, not out of weakness, but because they were done. They sealed away their worst, their generals, their sins, their champions, in ships like this, frozen in stasis, hidden across dead zones of space. Why? Because if even one of them woke up, the galaxy would bleed again. Valshar fell to his knees, gasping. The corpse's head tilted slightly. "You are not ready. You are not worthy, yet you found me. That means your galaxy is already broken." Valshar grit his teeth. "What happens now?" "I wait for the next war." The room began to shake. Alarms, sirens. The outer walls collapsed. Vacuum roared in through splitting hulls. Valshar grabbed onto the nearest bulkhead, but the pressure was failing. Above him, the corpse began to rise, not from strength, but as if the ship itself was lifting it like a god raising its prophet. Outside the window, he saw the tracer fang retreating. His crew had seen enough. Cowards. But they were right. This wasn't salvage. This was the resurrection of extinction, and it had just begun. In a final pulse of energy, the vault ejected Valshar. He was flung into the void, caught seconds later by an emergency drone that auto-triggered as part of his armor fail-safe. As the drone carried him away, barely conscious, barely breathing, he looked back one last time. The ancient human ship was changing. Its engines were waking up. systems rebooting. The words broadcast across every Zenthari channel within 100 light-years, words in human tongue. Crusade resumed. Target: galactic civilization. Valshar passed out before the first stars began to die. Valshar awoke inside a containment pod. The hiss of recycled oxygen, dim yellow lights, bio-readouts blinking quietly overhead. Pain scratched at every nerve ending in his body, and for a moment, he thought he was still inside the human ship, being torn apart by whatever ancient thing lived behind those rusted walls. But no, he was back aboard the Tracer Fang. Alive. At least, technically. He sat up with a grunt. His joints ached like they'd aged a century. The pod door slid open, and cold air bit into his skin. Koresh stood outside the chamber, arms folded, face tight with restrained panic. "You're awake," Koresh said, voice low. "Good. Now explain what the hell that thing was." Valshar stepped down slowly, still reeling. "We didn't find a relic. We found a tombstone. And something inside just tore its way back into life." Koresh didn't blink. "It's moving." Valshar froze. "The ship?" Koresh nodded grimly. "It came online 27 minutes after your extraction. Thrusters fired, core ignited, entire hull restructured. It's not drifting anymore. It's navigating. It chose a course. It's moving toward populated space." Valshar's throat tightened. "How long until it reaches the Dominion perimeter?" Koresh didn't answer. He turned and walked down the corridor. Valshar followed. The command deck was in chaos. Officers shouted into comms, trying to override Dominion protocols just to get someone, anyone, to believe what they were transmitting. The data feed played across the central screen. A black, jagged starship, once dormant, once a coffin, now pulsed with life. The engines burned cold blue. Its trajectory was clear. A direct path to Nargathos, a populated world with over 6 billion Zenthari citizens. Valshar's jaw locked. "Why Nargathos?" Koresh looked at him grimly. "Maybe because it's our capital shipyard, maybe because it's the heart of our empire, or maybe, just maybe, that thing doesn't care about the why. It just knows how to hurt." Another voice cut in. High Admiral Dravik, patched through the emergency Dominion channel, appeared as a red hologram over the main display. "Commander Valshar," Dravik said coldly, "explain your actions, now." Valshar stood straight, but his voice was strained. "We discovered an unidentified vessel, human origin, estimated age over 100,000 years. It was in stasis until our presence triggered an awakening. We attempted to withdraw, but you violated artifact engagement protocol. You entered without authorization. You activated something that should have remained sealed. I made a judgment call." "You made a mistake," Dravik barked. "That ship is now en route to a Dominion world. Every war protocol is being reinitialized because of you." Valshar didn't flinch. "I don't think war protocols are going to matter." There was a beat of silence. Then the Admiral narrowed his gaze. "Explain." Valshar took a breath. "That ship isn't a warship. It's not just tech. It's not even a machine in the traditional sense. It's alive, it's memory, vengeance, designed by a species that made extinction their legacy. We've studied human weapons from 10,000 years ago. Their virus mines, their orbital terraformers, their suicide AI swarms. That ship's beyond any of it." Dravik didn't respond. Valshar stepped forward. "Sir, we didn't rediscover a lost empire. We woke up the thing they left behind to make sure no one ever forgot them." The Admiral's image flickered. "We are mobilizing the Armada. 40 dreadnoughts will intercept." Valshar's gut twisted. "Then you'll lose 40 dreadnoughts." Koresh turned to him. "You think it can't be stopped?" "I think it doesn't understand what stopping means." 6 hours later, The galaxy found out what he meant. The first interception fleet, Dominion Dread Group Delta, made contact with the ancient human ship near the edge of the Tyran corridor. A live broadcast was fed to every military command post across known space. Valshar stood in the dark briefing room aboard the Tracer Fang, watching. The dreadnoughts formed a siege perimeter around the target. Every class of weapon was locked in: plasma, neutron lances, molecular disintegration beams. The human ship didn't fire, it didn't maneuver, it just stopped. Then, one by one, the dreadnoughts died. Not with explosions, not with a firefight. They folded, like paper burning from the inside out. 1 minute they existed. The next, they were erased from the fabric of reality, gone. No debris, no energy trail, just absence. The feed went black. Koresh turned to Valshar, his mandibles twitching with disbelief. "What kind of weapon does that?" Valshar didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the dead screen. And then, from somewhere in the shadows of the ship's hull, the human vessel began broadcasting. Not data, not threats, music, crackling ancient Earth audio, a piano, slow, haunting. A man singing, tired, mournful, human. "We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when." Valshar stared at the console as the song echoed through the Dominion's emergency frequency like a funeral hymn. The ship wasn't just killing, it was remembering. Back on the command deck, Dominion officers were panicking. Strategic Command issued a Code Black, a status not declared since the Mirren War. Entire star systems were ordered to evacuate. But Valshar knew it wouldn't matter. This wasn't an invasion. It was a reckoning. The following 2 days blurred into horror. A mining colony on Drelvis 13, gone. A fortress moon with 11 garrisons, silenced. Nothing escaped, nothing survived. But worst of all, no explanation, no demands, no negotiation, just silence and music. More Earth broadcasts. Some were songs. Some were old military speeches. One looped a man's voice, saying over and over, "They will forget us, and then we will come." In the Dominion capital, paranoia spread faster than evacuation orders. The Senate turned against itself. High Admiral Dravik was removed from command after losing contact with 5 more fleets. A dozen smaller civilizations pulled out of military pacts, terrified they'd be next. And still the ship came on, its course unchanging, its velocity increasing. Every time someone tried to calculate its energy output, the numbers broke physics. It wasn't burning fuel, it was burning memory. Valshar sat alone in his quarters, staring at a projection of the ship's trajectory. He zoomed in. Then again. Then his blood ran cold. He called Koresh immediately. "Bring up the original path again. Check the gravity wells. The asteroid drift zones, look at what it's avoiding." Koresh blinked. "What?" "It's not heading for the capital. It's avoiding the military systems. It's not moving like a weapon. It's moving like..." He stopped. Like something looking for a home. Suddenly, it clicked. This wasn't just a warship. It was a return, not to kill randomly, but to finish something it once started. And it wasn't alone. Across the Dominion border, 3 more dead zones began flickering on the deep scan net. 3 more dormant ships. One signal came from within the shattered remains of an old moon. Another from a starless system thought uninhabitable. The third, from a black hole's event horizon. They were all waking up. Valshar felt something deep in his gut, an old, primal understanding. Humanity didn't leave behind one monster. They left a legion. Each ship was a burial site for the darkest parts of their crusade. Parts they couldn't kill, couldn't bury. So they locked them in machines, fed by hate, powered by pain, designed never to stop until they were called back. And now they were answering. Koresh's voice was barely a whisper. "It's not a ship. It's a signal flare. We triggered one. Now they all know." Valshar stared out the viewport into the dark. "We didn't awaken history," he said. "We just called back the end of it." 3 more ships. 3 more ghosts from a war the galaxy never even remembered fighting. The Dominion's network was drowning in confusion. No one knew where to look, who to trust, or what was real anymore. Command structures were fracturing under the pressure, and fear had become the only shared language across the systems. Valshar stood in the war chamber of the Tracer Fang, surrounded by flickering hollow projections and jittering sound feeds. Each image showed a location where new ancient human signals had emerged. None of them made sense. How had they been hidden for so long? How had no one known? And worst of all, why were they all waking up now? Koresh leaned over the console beside him, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. His voice was dry. "Intercept group sent to the crater moon and the black star field. No returns. Same outcome." "Erased?" Valshar asked. Koresh nodded grimly. "No debris, no signal, no survivors." Valshar ran a hand down his jaw, the stubble rough against his fingertips. His body ached. His ribs still hurt from the blast that had thrown him out of the first ship. He hadn't slept properly in 3 days. "Any movement from the ship, we woke." Koresh hesitated. "It changed course." Valshar turned to him sharply. "Where?" A silence. Then Koresh activated a small side display and pulled up the new trajectory. Valshar felt his stomach tighten. The ship wasn't heading for a capital anymore. It was descending toward Jerokth 4, a backwater colony world with no military significance, no resource value, and barely 400,000 inhabitants. "Why the hell would it go there?" Koresh muttered. Valshar's face went pale. "I know that planet," he said quietly. "My father was stationed there before the fall of Trinvak. He used to say Jerokth was one of the last planets where human outposts were sighted during the collapse. No one took it seriously. Just myths. Ghost stories. Then why's it going back?" Valshar stepped forward, his voice low. "Because that planet holds something we weren't supposed to find, and it wants it back." By the time the Tracer Fang reached orbit above Jerokth 4, chaos had already begun. The planet's communications were down, scanners were scrambled. Civilians were attempting evacuation on stolen freighters, many of which were overloaded and exploding mid-launch. But the ship, the human relic, wasn't attacking. It hovered, just above the atmosphere, silent and glowing with cold blue light, as if waiting. Valshar and Koresh touched down on the planet's surface in a rapid deployment shuttle. The moment they stepped out, they could feel it. Not in the air, not in the soil, in the blood. Every part of Jerokth felt wrong, like reality itself was humming, off tune. The sky pulsed a soft red every few seconds, even though there was no storm. At the central colony ruins, an abandoned site from centuries ago, they found it. A tower, no higher than a 3-story building made of dark obsidian and weathered steel. Not Zenthari design, not Dominion, and certainly not natural. On its side was a symbol, a 5-pointed star, jagged and burned into the stone. Valshar froze. "That's human military insignia." Koresh stepped back instinctively. "I thought all their bases were destroyed." Valshar shook his head. "The ones we saw were. The ones they wanted us to see." Koresh looked at him. "You're saying this was a forward base?" Valshar crouched, brushing dirt off the panel near the base of the tower. The letters were faint, but still readable. Arc 7, Phoenix Cycle. He stood slowly. "It's worse than that." "What is it then?" Valshar's voice was cold. A memory vault. Koresh blinked. Memory? They weren't just warriors, Valshar muttered. They were historians, obsessive ones. Every human campaign, every genocide, every betrayal, they recorded it all, not as archives, not as data, but as living memory. Koresh scoffed. That's insane. Who stores history in flesh and metal? Valshar stared at the vault. People who don't want history to be forgotten. Inside the tower, it was silent. The walls were lined with black tubes, each filled with a strange glowing fluid. Thousands of them. Suspended within were fragments, not bodies, not exactly. Pieces of them. Brains with cables, spines with memory chips burned into the bone. Eyes that tracked movement even though they were no longer connected to anything living. Koresh's breath caught. This is madness. Valshar's eyes narrowed. No. This is revenge. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal. On it, a single sphere, glassy, pulsing red. As they approached, the lights in the tower dimmed. The sphere came alive. Voice identified. Commander Irek Valshar. Access granted. Final entry. Valshar didn't speak. The sphere projected an image. A human, male, mid-30s, scarred face, eyes dead and cold. Behind him, a war-ravaged battlefield. Smoke, corpses, fires that didn't go out. He began to speak. If you're seeing this, then the fail-safes are down. That means one of us has reawakened, maybe more. And if that's true, then you've failed. All of you. We gave you peace. You spat on it. We gave you mercy. You exploited it. So now, we give you us. Again. No empires, no diplomacy, no alliances, just memory, and fire, and blood. The message ended. Koresh turned to Valshar. This is bigger than anything we ever trained for. Valshar stared at the sphere. They're not attacking randomly. They're following a pattern. Each ship will return to one of these memory vaults, not to reclaim, to reignite. They're lighting the fires they left buried, and when they're done, they'll finish what they started. Koresh's voice trembled. What do we do? Valshar looked at him. We stop lying to ourselves. Back in orbit, the human ship finally moved. It descended, slowly, carefully, and hovered above the tower. A beam of light extended from its underside, scanning the vault like a priest delivering last rites. Then, the tower began to crumble, not from weapons, from time. The materials disintegrated, atom by atom, as if the ship was rewinding history, erasing its own footprints. Once the tower was gone, the beam vanished, and the ship changed course again, its next destination lit up on the star charts. Another vault, another piece of their forgotten history, another grudge. Valshar watched it go, standing silently on the dead soil of Jerokth 4. Koresh came beside him. Should we report this? Valshar's jaw tightened. To who? The cowards in the Dominion Senate? The military leaders still throwing fleets at ghosts? No, we don't report this. Then what? Valshar turned, eyes burning. We prepare. We track every vault. We find them before the ships do. Because when the last one is lit, there's not going to be a war. Koresh frowned. Then what? There's going to be a judgment. Valshar's boots were still caked in Jerok soil when the recall order came through. Dominion High Command didn't even send it directly. The message arrived encrypted through a proxy relay ship, unsigned and marked with black level clearance. Return to Nargathos immediately or be designated a rogue actor. Valshar read it once, then deleted it. Cowards. They still didn't understand what they were dealing with. Worse, they didn't want to understand. They wanted to shove this horror into a box, label it as a rogue anomaly, and throw it into a bureaucratic void until it stopped making noise. Koresh leaned in from the side of the command deck, reading Valsher's face. "They're calling you a traitor already, aren't they?" Valsher said nothing. He didn't need to. He turned away from the comms screen and stared at the holographic star map displaying the locations of all known human vault sites. 4 had been visited. 3 were already gone. 1 still glowed, untouched, quiet, waiting. Vault 9B, deep orbit around a gas giant called Cernak's Halo. Not on any major route, off-grid, forgotten, just like the humans wanted. "They're reconstructing something," Valsher muttered. Koresh blinked. "What do you mean?" Valsher stepped toward the map. Each vault contained something different. Memories, yes, but also pieces. Code, ancient keys, structural data. They've been retrieving parts of a larger puzzle, something they can't finish until all the vaults are reclaimed. Koresh's mandibles clicked. "Some kind of master weapon?" Valsher shook his head. "No, not a weapon." He hesitated, the words heavy on his tongue. "A signal." Koresh narrowed his eyes. "You think they're trying to contact someone?" Valsher nodded. "Or something." Back on Nargathos, High Command was bleeding authority like a punctured lung. Entire fleets were abandoning central orders. Systems were declaring neutrality. Entire outer rim sectors had already shut down comms traffic out of fear that even talking about the human ships would draw their attention. Inside the War Senate, a storm was brewing. Valshar knew the rumors. The Admiralty wanted a scapegoat. His name was already being whispered in shadow corridors, accompanied by the phrase, "failure of protocol, catalyst of disaster." The political machine was waking up, not to face the enemy, but to blame the mirror. They couldn't face the fact that humanity had never been defeated, only forgotten. Valsher sat in the command chair aboard the Tracer Fang, staring at the live feed of Vault 9B. No sign of the ship yet. But it was coming. He could feel it. Not in some spiritual sense. Not guesswork. Instinct. A warrior's sense. The kind his father had tried to beat into him when he was just a stripling, before the fires of Trinvak burned half their battalion and left Valsher the last survivor. He stood slowly. "We move now," he ordered. Koresh blinked. "To Vault 9B?" Valsher nodded. "If they get there before we do, we lose our only chance to understand why." The journey took 12 hours through unstable corridors of space. They had to bypass 2 Dominion patrols and fly silent for 3 of those hours just to avoid forced docking. Valsher didn't care. Let the Dominion label him a traitor. He wasn't interested in politics anymore. He wanted the truth. Vault 9B was nothing like the tower on Jirok 4. It floated in orbit above a boiling gas giant, hidden within the rings of debris and electromagnetic storms. It was buried inside an artificial asteroid, a shell that fractured open like a cracked egg when their proximity signal hit it. Inside, they found the vault. Sleek, cold, smaller than the others, but more active. Its surface shimmered with pulses of light, as if recognizing their arrival. No weapons, no defense systems, just that eerie feeling again, like something old was watching. Valsher and Koresh stepped onto the platform, alone. He didn't want anyone else. This wasn't a mission for soldiers. This was personal now. The vault's door opened without command. Inside was a single pedestal. And on that pedestal a sphere of glass, black as the void between galaxies. No lights, no hum, no projection. Just silence. Valsher reached out, hesitated, then touched it. The silence shattered. Not with noise, with presence. Something entered him, not violently, not invasively, but deeply, like a hand gripping his mind from inside his skull. And then the visions came. Not of war, not of fire, of home, a field of green, A sky of blue, laughter, music, children running through the grass, and then a flash. Bombs, cities crumbling, moons splitting. The same children now dressed in black armor, holding rifles larger than their torsos. Humanity didn't go extinct. They evolved into war. They chose to burn everything that couldn't match them. And when the galaxy had nothing left to fight, they walked away. The vision ended. Valshar stumbled back, breath shallow, his hands shaking. Koresh steadied him. "What did you see?" Valshar wiped blood from his nose. "They didn't lose control of their war machines," he whispered. "They became them." Koresh's face twisted. "I don't understand. Why store all this? Why leave vaults behind like markers?" Valshar looked at the sphere, his voice hollow. "Because they didn't want to forget what they'd become. They didn't want us to forget." Koresh turned slowly. "Then what are they reconstructing?" Valshar stared at the stars through the broken asteroid shell. "They're building a beacon." "To who?" Valshar turned to him, eyes dark. "To the ones that made them." Before Koresh could respond, alarms flared. The ship had arrived. Outside the vault, a long shadow blocked the gas giant's light. The human relic. No longer dormant, no longer half awake, fully operational. Its underside opened, but this time no weapons emerged. Instead, a pod launched, and inside it, a man, not a machine, not a drone, human, alive. The pod landed gently on the vault platform. The hatch opened, and a man stepped out, tall, bald, muscled like a forged statue. His face was older than time, eyes like glass, jaw made of grafted steel. He wore no armor, no weapons, just a long black coat with a red five-pointed star on the shoulder. He looked at Valshar. Then he smiled. "You're the one who opened the first door," he said. Valshar's voice came out hoarse. "Who are you?" The man stepped forward. "I was once Commander Thorn of the 7th Crusade Fleet." Koresh stared. "You're human?" Thorn turned to him. "I'm what's left." Valshar gritted his teeth. "Why now? Why return?" Thorn looked up at the stars. "Because your species forgot. You all forgot, and now it's time to remember." Koresh took a step forward. "This is vengeance? Some crusade for old wars?" Thorn chuckled. It was a sound like gravel grinding on bone. "No, this isn't vengeance. It's continuation. We never ended the war. You just stopped being worth the effort." Valshar felt something burn in his chest. Rage, grief, something deeper. "What are you signaling? What is the purpose of the beacon?" Thorn looked back at him, face unreadable. "We thought we were the apex. But we weren't. There was something before us. And now," he paused, his voice low, "we're calling it back." Valshar had seen monsters before. He'd seen mind-burned cultists of the Black Coil, breathing ash and screaming prayers into their own veins. He'd seen Dominion flesh harvesters who operated on living civilians just to study how long they could keep screaming. He'd once even walked the battlefield of Draxos Prime, where time collapsed and soldiers bled in both directions. But this man, this thing, standing in front of him like a calm god in a storm, Commander Thorn, he wasn't a monster. He was worse. He was human, not the weak tribal myths Dominion scholars had written about in their censored archives. Not the emotional, chaotic animals history had quietly turned into a warning story. No, Thorn was something else entirely. He was intent made flesh. And Valshar could feel it, in his voice, in his movements, in the emptiness behind his eyes. This man hadn't just fought in the 1,000-year crusade. He'd survived it. He'd become the kind of soldier that the universe needed to forget. Valshar's voice broke the silence. You said this isn't vengeance. Thorn nodded. It isn't. Then why now? Valsher asked. Why wake the ships? Why the vaults? What are you really doing? Thorn turned, slowly walking toward the edge of the shattered asteroid that had once housed Vault 9B. The gas giant beneath them swirled with colors like bruised flesh, storms raging in slow, eternal spirals. We fought everything, Thorn said, voice even. Every species, every fleet, every idea of peace. You think the Dominion was the first to try and rule this galaxy? The first to enforce order through superiority? He smiled faintly, but it was hollow. You're just one more empire built on the illusion of strength. Koresh's eyes narrowed. You destroyed entire systems without cause. Thorn didn't look at him. We destroyed threats before they had time to become tragedies. Valsher took a step forward. And the vaults? What's the purpose of preserving atrocities? This time Thorn turned his head. To remind us of what we're capable of. A rumble echoed beneath their feet. The vault pulsed again, this time glowing white. The sphere at its core flickered and cracked, then shattered. The beacon activated. A thin line of light surged into the sky like a knife through darkness, piercing the atmosphere and reaching far into space. Data, memory, raw emotion, all broadcast into the void. Valsher turned sharply. You said this was a signal. Thorn nodded. The final one. To who? Koresh demanded. For a long time, Thorn said nothing. Then his words came like ice. To the ones who made us. It felt like the vacuum itself inhaled. Valsher stared. What the hell does that mean? Thorn took a deep breath. For the first time, something like hesitation entered his expression. You think humans were born for war? That we evolved to conquer? He shook his head. No. We were engineered. Koresh barked a bitter laugh. That's not possible. Human biology is primitive, crude. And yet we built weapons that your brightest minds still don't understand, Thorn said calmly. We walked through your strongest defenses like sand. We fought wars across time, space, and consciousness. You think that's evolution? It was design. Valsher's blood ran cold. By who? Thorn looked up into the stars. The first architects. Koresh scoffed again, this time quieter. Myth. No such species ever confirmed. That's because they erased themselves before your kind even learned to use fire, Thorn said. They didn't die. They vanished, but not before leaving us behind. Valsher stepped closer. Why? To see if anything could become worse than them, Thorn replied. The vault behind them hummed louder. The beam intensified. In orbit, the relic ship responded. Its hull shifted again, new lines glowing along its spine. Systems came online that even Thorn hadn't seen active in millennia. Valsher's voice dropped to a whisper. You're waking them. Thorn nodded. Not just the ships. The creators. Valsher recoiled. You want them back? Thorn's voice didn't flinch. We want them to see what their experiment became. He turned to face them fully now. We were born to be their weapon, but we broke free. We left behind peace because peace was a leash. We became war itself. But now, the galaxy's gone soft again. Empires like yours, they think strength is measured in territory and protocol. No, strength is reminder. And we are the last lesson. Koresh backed away. You're insane. Thorn turned his eyes on him. Cold. Final. I watched your kind bomb colonies we'd already spared. I saw Dominion officers feed prisoners into gravity wells to save fuel. I saw your scientists reverse engineer our tech to build weapons you barely understood, just to control a few more sectors. You're not innocent. You're just not strong enough to finish what you start. The sphere behind Thorn exploded in a burst of colorless light. Valshar covered his eyes. When it cleared, the vault was gone, completely, absolutely gone, erased from matter. No debris, no noise, like it had never existed. In orbit, the human relic ship changed again. The front opened, and for the first time, Valshar saw inside. Rows of cryo-chambers, hundreds, maybe thousands, each one occupied. Men and women, human, armored, waiting, sleeping. Not relics, Valshar whispered. Not AIs. Soldiers. Thorn stepped beside him, watching the sky. Each ship housed a crusade battalion. Not destroyed, not buried, just put on ice, because we knew this day would come. Koresh was pale now. His voice broke. You're going to wake them. Thorn nodded. One by one. Valshar's chest ached with a weight he couldn't name. He had served the Dominion with full belief in order, in discipline. He had buried comrades, crushed rebellions, and given medals to men who wiped out cities because it was strategic. He had told himself it was necessary. But standing here, under a dead vault with a nightmare in human form beside him, Valshar realized something bitter. They'd all been playing soldier in a galaxy that was never theirs to begin with. And now, the real owners were coming home. Koresh turned to Valshar, desperation in his voice. We have to warn them. The Dominion, the outlying systems. We have to mobilize everyone. Valshar didn't respond. He looked at Thorn. Can they stop you? Thorn's eyes didn't blink. No. Valshar asked again, slower. Is there anything that can? This time, Thorn hesitated. One thing, he said finally. A memory strong enough to match ours. Koresh growled. What the hell does that mean? Valshar understood. They have to remember what real war is. Thorn turned toward him. Or bleed until they do. When the Tracer Fang returned to Dominion space, the war had already begun. Not in the way Valshar had known war. Not with lines drawn in the stars or fleets clashing for the glory of dead senators. No. This was something else. A cleansing. A purge. The first awakened Crusade battalion from the SS Nova, Gloria had descended on the frontier systems 3 hours before Valshar's arrival. No demands, no declarations, just silence. And then erasure. The star system of Volterra gone in 8 minutes. No radiation, no heat residue, just wiped from the grid entirely. The planet Sharin, formerly home to 8 million Zinthari and 2 research universities, was now a black sphere of vitrified glass, still smoldering from orbit. Valshar stood on the bridge, hands trembling, staring at the reports pouring in. Koresh didn't speak. He didn't need to. They both knew what they were watching. Not conquest, not even war. This was correction, a species coming back to erase a galaxy that failed its test. The Dominion's response had been immediate and idiotic. 12 dreadnought fleets deployed. 42 planetary defense rings activated, dozens of AI-assisted doomsday weapons greenlit without oversight, and none of it mattered. The battalions didn't fight like anything the Dominion had faced. There were no formations, no recognizable tactics. The humans didn't rely on superiority of arms. They were the weapon. They dropped soldiers behind planetary shields using trans-quantum slip pods. They disrupted entire planetary economies using psychological data mined from ancient Dominion behavior archives. They hacked cultural myths, broadcasting lies that shattered civilian morale in minutes. Worst of all, the soldiers didn't wear ranks. They didn't follow hierarchy. Each one acted as if they alone were the war. Within 6 hours, 2 high admirals were dead, one by orbital strike, the other, allegedly, by suicide, though Valshar suspected the guilt had simply crushed him. By hour 7, a third of the Dominion Senate had gone silent. Hour 8. Entire border systems were broadcasting surrender before the humans even arrived. Valshar shut off the feed. He couldn't watch anymore. It wasn't just defeat. It was collapse. Everything they'd built was falling, not because the humans were better soldiers, but because the Dominion had never believed it could lose. Valshar sat in his quarters, armor half removed, hands blood-stained from the last boarding op gone wrong. Koresh entered without knocking. He looked worse than ever, exhausted, dehydrated, but alive. "They're asking for you," Koresh said. Valshar didn't look up. "Who?" "Command. What's left of it." "Let them rot." "They're panicking. They want you to lead a diplomatic convoy. They think they can negotiate a ceasefire." Valshar laughed. It was dry, bitter. "Negotiate with what? History?" Koresh leaned on the wall, his voice low. "They still think this is a political problem." "It's not," Valshar said. "It's biological." Koresh looked over. "How so?" Valshar stood, walked to the viewing port. "The humans don't care about territory. They don't even care about survival. This isn't about power." He turned. "It's about memory." Koresh said nothing. Valshar stepped closer. "You know why they left vaults behind? Not just to wake up, but to show us what we did to earn this." Koresh finally spoke. "What now, then? What the hell do we do?" Valshar didn't answer at first. Then, "We find the last vault." It wasn't on any official map. Valshar only found it because of what Thorne had said back on Vault 9B. "There's only one thing that can stop us, something that remembers." A memory strong enough to match theirs, and as he dug through ancient Dominion recon data, classified even above Senate access, he found it. Vault 0. The first. The one never meant to be opened. Location: unknown. Buried beneath something called the Red Wake, a dead nebula beyond the reach of any Dominion beacon. But the coordinates were in there, hidden under 3 layers of encryption only available to Dominion high executioners. Valshar broke them in 3 hours. Koresh stared at the star path, then back at Valshar. "You're going to go there?" Valshar nodded. "Alone?" "I think we both know I'm already alone." The Tracer Fang jumped into the Red Wake 3 days later. After avoiding 6 active kill zones and transmitting a false distress signal to avoid detection from an awakened human dreadship, Valshar piloted solo. Koresh stayed behind, assigned to coordinate false evacuations as cover. Neither of them said goodbye. They both knew what this was. In the Red Wake, space felt wrong. Thick. It wasn't just debris or magnetic interference. It was age. Valshar maneuvered the ship through the dense cloud until the scanners picked up the anomaly. A floating station, built into a hollow asteroid. Human design, but different. Primitive. Older. No heat, no signal. Just one phrase etched into the outer hull. "Forget nothing." He docked manually. The airlock hissed open, stale air washing over him like a sigh from the grave. Inside, darkness, and then a whisper. Not words. Emotions. Fear. Hope. Rage. Loss. It wasn't a vault. It was a wound. And inside that wound he found it. A single chair, facing a broken terminal. In it, a skeleton, still upright, still armed. On the wall behind it, etched with something sharp and desperate, was a sentence in ancient human dialect. "We chose to remember so that no one else would have to." Valshar approached the skeleton. There was something fused to its skull, some kind of interface port, ancient and burned out. And next to it, a small black cube. Data, untouched. Valshar took it. The moment he did, the vault shuddered. Lights flickered. The terminal rebooted. Words filled the screen. "Protocol override detected." Are you ready to remember? Valshar stared at it, then pressed. Yes. The data surged into his mind like a needle of lightning. He saw everything. The birth of the First Crusade battalions. The moment Earth's last government collapsed under its own war machine. The day they realized they couldn't stop themselves. So they did something worse. They distributed the memory. They stored it across the galaxy. And erased themselves. So that one day, when someone else became arrogant enough to believe they ruled the stars, the reminders would return. The Crusade wasn't just a war. It was a failsafe, a virus buried in the stars. A final message. There is no peace without fear. There is no empire that forgets war and survives it. And now, they were awake again, because the Dominion had forgotten. Valshar collapsed to his knees, eyes bloodshot, chest heaving. He understood now. This wasn't about the humans reclaiming territory. It was about balance. A brutal, inescapable form of balance that required blood to enforce memory. And the galaxy? It had gone too long without bleeding. He rose slowly, cube in hand, walked back toward his ship. He didn't feel like a soldier anymore, not a commander, not a citizen of anything. He was a witness, and maybe that was enough. Valshar returned to Dominion space in silence. No welcome, no orders, no beacons. What was left of High Command had gone dark. Scattered fleets drifted in low orbit over shattered worlds. The few active Dominion channels were full of panic and static. Cities burned across 5 sectors. Civilian worlds were abandoned, their orbiting defense rings left to spiral dead and empty. There were no battle plans anymore, just noise, and whispers of human ships moving through space like ghosts made of fire. But Valshar wasn't here to stop them. Not anymore. He came back to show them why it was happening. And what they could never undo. Koresh was waiting. His face was thinner, eyes hollowed out from sleepless nights and too many emergency briefings. The Dominion's military had formally declared him unfit for leadership. But no one had stepped up to replace him. Most were too busy digging their escape tunnels or bribing off-world smugglers. "I thought you were dead," Koresh said quietly as Valshar stepped off the landing ramp. "I was," Valshar said, holding up the small black cube. "But now I remember what they wanted us to forget." Koresh stared at the object, then at the man holding it. "What's on it?" "Everything." They uploaded the data into the last functioning Dominion archive tower on Karin Prime, a once proud capital world now covered in layers of ash, soot, and orbital wreckage. The tower had been a symbol, built to remind future generations of the Dominion's supposed superiority, its eternal order. Now it stood like a tombstone. Inside, the surviving senators, maybe 12 of them, gathered under high alert. Their guards still wore ceremonial armor, but their faces were pale, terrified. Valshar walked in like a man carrying a loaded bomb. He was. The cube in his hand pulsed faintly, not with power, but with memory. They gave him the floor, not out of respect, but fear, and Valshar wasted no time. "You wanted to understand why the humans are wiping us out," he said. "Why their ships don't speak, why they don't stop, why they don't negotiate." He held up the cube. "This is why. They're not here to conquer us. They're here to correct us." He slammed the cube into the archive terminal. Light filled the room, holograms firing across the domed ceiling, battles, visions, screams. Humanity's final wars, the collapse of Earth, the rise of the Crusade battalions, Vault Zero. Some senators wept, others cursed. A few simply shut down, too afraid to process what they were seeing. But Valshar wasn't finished. "You built your empire on forgetfulness," he said, voice sharp. "You rewrote the truth. You buried history under medals and parades. You taught generations that humanity was a fable, a species that burned itself out. But they didn't. They left us this. A reminder. He pointed to a projection of Thorn standing at Vault 9B. They were the product of something greater, an ancient species, maybe gods, maybe demons, the first architects. Humanity wasn't born from Earth. They were engineered. And when they escaped that purpose, they forged one of their own, to ensure the galaxy never forgot fear. A senator stood, shaking with fury. You're asking us to believe this is… what? A moral punishment? You expect us to accept annihilation? Valshar stepped closer, eyes like flint. No, I expect you to accept the truth. You were never rulers, you were stewards, and you failed. Another senator, taller, more composed, spoke next. Then what would you have us do, Commander? Surrender? Offer our worlds to be slaughtered in the name of memory? Valshar looked around the room. How many fleets do you have left? Silence. How many soldiers still believe in what this empire stands for? None answered. He walked to the center of the room, slow, deliberate. You don't have an empire anymore. You have a lesson waiting to be carved into your bones. That night, Dominion communications lit up with something no one expected. Valshar's full archive transmission, all of it, released across every civilian, military, and interstellar broadcast line. The recordings from Vault Zero, Thorn's speech, the data logs of Earth's final breath, the footage of humanity's last choice to seal away its warriors as relics and let the galaxy forget what real war looked like. The message at the end played on a loop. Peace was a mercy. You made it into weakness. Now you will remember. Across the Dominion, reactions varied. Some worlds went silent. Entire populations suicided rather than wait. Others began executing local governors, purging their leadership. Desperate to prove they were clean in the eyes of their coming judges. One system, Drasher Delta, sent a formal broadcast to the human ships. We built monuments to your dead. We remembered. We remembered. Please, don't. The signal cut off mid-sentence. That system was gone 2 minutes later. On the bridge of the tracer Fang, Koresh and Valshar watched the stars flicker with silence. It didn't matter, Koresh said hollowly. We gave them the truth, and still… Valshar nodded slowly. Because truth wasn't the point. He turned away from the viewport. Memory was. It took 5 more days for the last vault to be confirmed destroyed. By then, 12 more human ships had emerged from deep space. Each one carried new battalions, fresh soldiers, still asleep. But not for long. Valshar stared at the data screen and made his decision. We go to them. Koresh blinked. You want to die in front of their guns? No, Valshar said. I want to remember with them. Koresh stood in silence for a moment, then nodded. They didn't approach with weapons. No shields, no escort, just a single ship, broadcasting only one thing, the memory of Vault Zero. Over and over, a record of a species that broke its chains, destroyed its gods, and chose to become the last defense against forgetfulness. A quiet message, not asking for mercy, not bargaining, just remembering. The human ship received the transmission, held it, analyzed it, and did something that hadn't happened since this began. It paused. Then, a signal came through, text only, 6 words. You remember, you will be spared. Valshar didn't smile, didn't cheer. He just sat down and let the weight of it fall. They'd live. Not because they were strong, not because they begged, but because they remembered. Years later, Valshar sat on the shattered stone of the old Senate Tower. now reduced to rubble and vines. Around him, the last cities of the Dominion had become quiet places. Not broken, not abandoned, just quiet. No more fleets, no more conquests, just stories, told in whispers, in scars, in the ruins of temples and the names no longer spoken, and somewhere out there, in the black of space, the last crusade ships floated in silence, still watching, still waiting, not for orders, but for forgetfulness. Because they knew the cycle. Peace becomes comfort. Comfort becomes arrogance. And arrogance always forgets the blood it cost. But this time, maybe the memory would hold.